I want to, for the next 30 minutes or so, talk to John Young, the editor and one of the key founders of Cryptome.org. It's been around since 1996 by independent scholars and the architect John Young and others. And the New York Observer had an article that quoted myself, the original WikiLeaker, and it's got my quote in here, and I think it says it all, that his work is very important, said Alex Jones, the radio host and founder of Infowars.com. I don't really know of anybody who was posting secret, classified, and restricted, but also open source documents to a site and creating a library. And they cut my quote off there. I went on to say, before Cryptome. You have to say that he is the granddaddy of the WikiLeaks type phenomenon, and he was also knows some of the WikiLeakers and has had a critical view of Assange in the past. But now with all of this unfolding, we'll get John Young's breakdown on what he thinks is going on here. John, thanks for joining us.
Hello, Alex. Good to hear from you.
Good to have you here with us. We're going to break in a moment, but I have always stated that I believe Assange was being set up as a unwitting or perhaps witting asset of the CIA, like a Lee Harvey Oswald. We know there's the George-Soros, Leslie Gelb, all of those connections there. And Wayne Madsen has agreed with you that it's suspicious. So has Webster Tarpley. Now it appears that they're going to use this as an electronic 9/11, and they're announcing to come in and start shutting down web freedom on the internet.
Yeah, that's the kind of talk they're making. Now, I just say that I think they'd like to keep this going about another 10 years so they can keep asking for more money for it. So that I think they'll keep making these rumbling noises and hope that WikiLeaks or others like it will continue doing this thing because it's a tremendous way to raise funds for governments.
Again, they get to build their giant cybersecurity spying grids in the name of countering their own leakers.
That's right, and that's why they set up Cybercom, almost holding the hands of WikiLeaks to do so.
Amazing. Well, I mean, when we look at this, these women that set him up, one of them is absolutely, in Cuba running CIA ops. I mean, this is really, what do you think of Assange? Do you agree they're setting him up as the fall guy?
It's possible. Often people are set up with their not being completely witting about it, and it's not hard to do because there's a constant drumbeat of we need to challenge authority, we need to challenge the CIA, we need to do this and that, and so this is a fairly well-known way to get some traction for a website or an initiative and to raise some money through it. And so the allegation of having sexual affairs is usually a component of that.
Well, they claim that about Daniel Ellsberg. Stay there. Segment coming up. We'll continue to get into your overall view of the history of WikiLeaks, who's behind it, what's really happening with Julian Assange, these massive hack attacks against Sweden and MasterCard and Visa. John Young of Cryptome.org is our guest. He knows a lot about at least the founding and of WikiLeaks and some of the people involved. But it's on record that Cass-Sunstein, who said that they would basically sabotage the web by posing as freedom fighters and leakers, really introduced WikiLeaks to the world in 2007 in an editorial in the Washington Post that he wrote. So it's pretty much admitted this is a CIA group. As Mr. Young said on this show over a year ago and predicted much of what's now unfolded, if you're going to have $1 trillion war in Afghanistan or Iraq, you got to go stage some terror attacks, fund the opposition. If you're going to have an excuse to take over the web and spy on everybody, you've got to finance some leaks. And you see the media, the way they supported it, the way they always hype it up. But I think, again, Assange is a useful dupe that they're flushing down the toilet, but time will tell. I mean, specifically, John, walk through what you believe is happening here, the founding of WikiLeaks, where you think this is going. John, give us your view on the statements I just made. He must have lost our audio. I can hear him typing. That happens with phones sometimes. John Young, can you hear me? All right, we'll call him back.
No, I'm here.
Okay, John, go through your original concerns about WikiLeaks.
Well, as you know, Alex, I was sucker punched into serving as a public face of WikiLeaks because they didn't want any of them to be named in the registration of the website. So I did it because I've done it for others. And I was led to believe that it was a public benefit operation. But within a few weeks, it announced that it intended to raise $5 million in the first 6 months. I said, wait a minute. That doesn't sound like public benefit to me. That sounds like a high-value funded program. And I mentioned two examples, CIA and Soros. I didn't accuse them of that. I said it would be like that, in which deep pockets are funding something. You can't just raise money by an unknown organization in that brief period of time. Now, we know that businesses do that, though, with the same kind of rollout. And so that was my first sense that this was a business operation, not a public benefit operation. And it's turned out to be that. So, others may make the link to CIA and Soros, by the way, both of whom use the same techniques of claiming to be public benefit, but far from being the only ones. Churches do it, educational institutions do it, and so forth. So that public benefit is a well-known subterfuge for actually making pretty good money these days. Of course, following the government model.
Okay, now, so, I mean, that's an important tidbit. You registered, and that's been confirmed, the WikiLeaks URL to begin with. When was that, John?
That was in December 2007.
And have you seen the fact that it was Cass-Sunstein that basically introduced them to the world?
Say that again, Alex?
It was Cass-Sunstein who introduced WikiLeaks to the world in that Washington Post article he wrote in 2007.
Yep. That's right.
And this is a guy who openly says that he would pose as activists on the web as a pretext to bring censorship in. Now they're introducing the legislation to do just that. I mean, this is pretty obvious.
Well, it's certainly a complicated story and needs to be watched very carefully because I think there's a lot of smoke being blown about this and that a lot of the usual exculpation and accusation are being rolled out as part of that smoke blowing on all parties' sides. Some of the enthusiasts for WikiLeaks seem to be operating in concert with some of its opponents. It's like they're in lockstep to me.
Really? Okay, stay there. We're back in 1 minute, John. 1 minute break. I want to try to give you the floor so that I'm not just asking the questions. I want to give you the floor to break down what you think's going on and to cut through this fog of war, this fog of info war, and give us a clear image of what you, a true insider, thinks. We'll be right back. Well, this whole WikiLeaks situation is very complex, but bottom line, it's the pretext to bring in censorship control of the web. With the whole cybersecurity system being built up, and John Young of Cryptome.org predicted this. He's, again, the original WikiLeaker. He's the guy that set up the website originally for them, but then he pulled out very quickly. Now, he said years ago, looks like a Soros-type operation. Now we have clear connections to that. That's even mainstream media. Now, this is a short segment, long segment coming up, John, but I want to give you the floor. You talk about this, this being foggy. Bring clarity. I mean, as somebody who probably knows more about this than anybody else, in the next 4 minutes, you've got the floor. What do you want to say to folks about this? What do you think is most important?
Well, follow the money is, of course, a cliche, but true here, is that for 2.5 years, WikiLeaks was on the verge of bankruptcy. They shut down for a few months and came back with bombshells, and suddenly the money started pouring in. This is a well-known business model to hand out free cigarettes and then sell them after you get the addiction started. And so that it's also a well-known government technique to create a crisis, claim that we can't survive without it, and then demand more taxes and more budget increases. And so just watch how this unfolds. So I expect that there will be continuing crises raised by the WikiLeaks model, and that from low-level secrecy documents, we'll start getting dribbles of higher secrecy documents. It'll be dribbled out over time as they're now dribbling out the secret stuff. And so we'll get some more bombshells because it's proven to be extremely effective. Now, you know that we've kept the war on terrorism going exactly the same way. And so that these imaginary wars are very lucrative, particularly to governments and contractors who service governments, as well as individuals who seem to oppose governments. So I'm down on anti-war people as well as pro-war people because they seem to be working hand in hand. So I think that that's the lesson we've learned running our site, that there were all sorts of threats imputed to crypto. None of that has come to pass. It was just a shell game to make it seem like there's a threat, but there wasn't. We've never been shut down except by one time by Microsoft, which then withdrew it. Wikileaks was shut down once by a court, but then that was withdrawn. As far as I know, no officials have ever approached Wikileaks with a threat. Now, maybe they have, and they've kept it quiet. We always publicize when we're approached by officials to let them know that this is something of a shell game. So we'd like to see more attention paid to how often this occurs, not by WikiLeaks, but by others who are rushing to their support, but also rushing to oppose them. There's money to be made in this. And I'm talking about the media. I'm talking about the so-called outlaws, the so-called dissidents. This is a big-time operation. Everyone's getting in on this. So I'm admiring this taking place. So it'll be kept going for quite a while. Money's pouring in from all sides, to both sides of the fight. And so this use of the word cyber war is exactly part of that, our info war. Now, no, I'm not attacking your use of it, Alex, because you started this long ago. But right now, they're actually trying to escalate this into warlike crisis because this brings out the money.
Yeah, when I talk about info war, I mean getting people talking, saying no to tyranny. Their info war, they're talking about hacking and more the Pentagon version of that.
That's right. And so that's what Cybercom is now doing. They're going to milk cyber threats as much as they can over the next several years. And that's why I think that the Bradley Manning thing was a sting. They teach this stuff at Fort Huachuca, Alex, how people like Bradley Manning can do this and set up these sting operations. And so he was trained there. And so this smells like that to me. And there'll be more coming, though, because right now they're just testing the public's reaction with this low-level secrecy revelation, but the other stuff will come.
All right, stay there. We're going to come back in 3 minutes, John, long segment, and I want to continue to drill down into WikiLeaks. I mean, obviously, you've got all these Soros, CIA connections, cass-sunstein writing 2.5 years ago, that they would infiltrate the web, pose as activists, create crisis, then bring in censorship legislation. That's now happening. We'll be right back.